The fourth episode of the Orville's second season is interesting in a couple of ways because, on the surface, it is something that relies entirely upon sci fi tropes and themes and elements that are so incredibly common in just about every sci fi series you can think of, especially within Star Trek or any other long running science fiction series. The elements of a double agent, the idea of two characters being stuck on a planet or some sort of situation where they're at odds and they have to find a way to work together, even though they are enemies. And there's always the issue of one is either injured and has to help the other, or one is forced to carry something. In many cases, throughout many different series, it's something that is a sort of communication device, and they have to get to higher ground. There's always that element in that scenario, in that situation, and it's something that you can point to saying it's incredibly unoriginal, has been done 10,000 times before, but it's one of those formulas that I think has been a part of so many different science fiction stories and has become a staple because it is just such a good idea and something that just works well. And when the dynamic between those two characters who are forced together but are at odds, when the dynamic is done well and the dialogue is convincing and you really have an interest in the two characters, it really is the perfect setup, and one that's been used again and again and again for good reason. It's a perfect setup for really highlighting some issues and bringing about an interesting situation. And that's why I feel that even though it is sort of this, this trope of science fiction, that it's used again and again in just about every series you can think of because it works so well. It's just this basic idea, this sort of part of the primordial soup of science fiction. There are so many different things I could point to that every show has had that episode, and I think it's for good reason. There are certain formulaic things that actually are good, not just, everything's been done before in a way, but also everything's been done before. You can point to different elements that have been done many times because they continually work or have purpose and are a good way to form a backdrop for telling of a story. And I think this is one of those instances where it just depends how you view it, and I view it as something that really worked. You have the A and B story. The B story I enjoyed with Gordon wanting to take the command test because he is feeling uncertain of himself and really just doesn't perceive his own value, and you have that bit of a self-discovery through this episode, this a little bit of a journey of really defining who he is and learning whether or not he needs to be something more to feel appreciated by other people, and also within his own person. And then you have the A story, which continues the idea that the captain is now dating Lieutenant Janelle Tyler, who was a recent addition, and the not so hard to figure out twist that she was actually the female Krill teacher that he met in a previous episode in season 1. It was not that hard to figure out. I think it's something that everyone kind of saw coming in the future, and it was one I thought would actually take a little bit longer to come to the surface. I thought it would be several episodes of their relationship, and then you would get the big betrayal, but it was right away. But it did actually work well within this episode. It didn't feel rushed within the context of the single episode. So you have the little bit of the moving on elements of his relationship with Kelly, and since she's now been dating someone for a while, and now he's found love again, and you really sort of feel that relationship beginning. And they decide to take a break and take a shuttle trip. And while the Orville is on a very basic delivery mission, basically, they make fun of it as we're turning to the pizza delivery guys rather than actually doing exploration. And it ends up being a trap, and the captain is captured by the Krill, who are then attacked by another species, and we get more detail into the spread of the Krill Empire and its instability and how they've kind of spread too aggressively, and in some cases seem to be in a situation in the galaxy where they view everyone as inferior, and in that way have created way too many enemies, and that might actually be a crack in the system of their empire, that there are just too many forces that they're at odds with because their teaching of Avis makes them believe they're above everything else, and their whole society is founded on that. But we do get some details more into how their society has changed once they reach space travel, with how xenophobic they are and how they have perceived their religion has changed slightly as they have encountered other races throughout the galaxy. So you get a little bit of that, and then as they're attacked, then they are forced to escape, and their escape pod lands as the Krill ship is destroyed, lands on this planet, and they're being pursued, by the aliens that destroyed the Krill ship and are after them. And they're in that situation again of they have to reach a peak because of a magnetic field. It's either a magnetic field or some sort of radiation or something that makes it so the whatever communication device they're using can't be used. We need to get to higher ground. It's happened a million times, and it's always just a fun platform to start off the one-on-one relationship of the enemies that need to work together, and sometimes you form understanding by the end of the episode, and get a little bit of that and as they land on the dark side of the planet and they're trying to reach the peak by daylight. They are forced then to rest in a cave, though, for a while and take refuge, and you have this building of trust where I think in this episode in particular, Captain Ed Mercer, Seth MacFarlane's character, really solidifies this idea of this humanist approach, this very Gene Roddenberry idea of hope and really just working together, and of humanity's ultimate goal to be this perpetual beacon of light and spreading this collective unity and cooperation through the galaxy, and not giving up on that element, and finding peace not through forcing it at the end of a barrel of a gun, but trying to find ways to work together. And eventually they are able to be rescued by the crew of the Orville and taken aboard. And at that moment you get a bit of a parallel to one of the tests that Gordon was taking to try and reach the pass the command test. Was a situation where they had Krill prisoners on board, and there was the possibility of an exchange, and you can never quite get it right. And then you had the show of what command really means and the type of decisions, and as that situation occurs in real life, and Ed ends up letting her go partially because of his feelings for her, even though it was fake feelings, in many ways on her part. She really just, he was her mission. It was very real for him, and he still sees, and I believe also, that part of the fake Union officer that she created, part of it was her actual personality, and at moments there was a connection, even though they're so different. And the other thing too is he's setting up then to peace offering and an attempt to try and plant the seed of communication, because that's the one issue where they've not been able to even attempt to really broker peace with the Krill. There's never even been that first step of just genuine communication and some enough basic trust to even sit down at the table to negotiate. It's never even been that. So he's taking a chance at letting this prisoner go, that it will help at least bring about that possible process of some understanding. And it ends very well. And again, the overall episode, my impression is that it is very, very typical sci-fi. It is very, very just like a common basic sci-fi setup for a story, but it was done well. And this, again, I say, is a concept that I think is used over and over and over again, because it tends to really work, and I genuinely find it enjoyable, no matter what series it's in. And again, so many different sci-fi series have done this, but I really like this plot device, and I enjoy episodes that use this. It just works for me in many ways, and I think this really was another fantastic episode.